Leader of an attempted coup in the DRC has been killed and 50 others, including 3 Americans, arrested. Armed men attacked the Kinshasa presidential palace. The coup attempt was thwarted by Congolese defense and security forces yesterday. In a video, a man identified as Christian Malanga was killed at the presidential palace after he resisted arrest. This comes amid a crisis gripping President Felix Tshisekedi's governing party over the election of parliament's leadership, which was postponed on Saturday.
Felix, you out! Tokoli na diaspora, tokoli libanda. Kwa manyanga kata mo groupe watu mwa batamke. Otali bana basolande bazo vivre, eza normalité. Otali façon de vivre, eza normalité. Felix, you out! Felix, dégage, you out! We're coming for you. We're coming for you.
Well, let's get you some analysis now. We're joined by Joseph Ochieno, who is an African affairs writer and commentator. Joseph, it's great to talk to you. Thanks for coming on. Would you say that this attack was completely left field, a complete surprise, or is the environment in the DRC ripe for exactly this kind of event?
I wouldn't answer in the affirmative either way on any of those questions. But I must say that from the outset, I got a little bit of a surprise when I got the information. But the feeling in between was that there are all sorts of possibilities considering the history of DR Congo and indeed considering the history of this sub-region. What then bothered me a little was, is it the case that we've got now new big powers getting involved using literal African men at the front to do their bidding for them? In Congo, that is generally possible. It has been possible in countries aligned to the kind of polity in Congo. And considering the fact that it has got a huge amount of material wealth, which are usually being exploited both by established state actors and indeed very, very ruthless non-state actors. So all this then become possibilities.
Yeah.
But later, when I got the details about who really, in terms of this now, Mr. Christian Malanga, and you look through the videos, I thought the whole thing was rather amateurist. And I can say that perhaps we need to wait a little longer to try and establish whether there are local politicians in Congo using this guy, or indeed foreign forces, foreign interests in Congo. But in any case, I think it was sort of like rather amateurist. So the fact that they actually ever attempted it in the manner in which they did, unless there really other things that we don't know, was that is the bit which is slightly surprising.
Amateurish, Joseph, but the armed men gained access to Tshisekedi's office. They raided the home of the former president of the National Assembly of the DRC. 3 people were killed in a gunfire exchange there. So amateurish or not, they came pretty close.
That is absolutely true. They came close, in which case then the question of the, if you like, the security of the presidency, considering the history of DR Congo, where a serving president has been assassinated. You're right. Also, on the other hand, the fact that seemingly the presidential palace, there seem to have been less casualties does not mean that there's less force applied. Relative to that happened in Vital Kamahe's residence, where, as I understand it, up to 3 of these guys were killed. How did they gain entrance? So that basically means that there must really be some local actors in this. But as I said, as far as the politics of Congo is concerned, which is a country struggling to stabilize itself, it's not difficult. That said, I'm not quite sure whether you want to seek to overthrow a government of a very big country, Congo. Of course, people look down upon it because tiny little countries have sort of bullied them, just like bigger countries have. But that is really, and as I said, I am my strength is really not in security and the military. But no, I am an observer of some of these other things, and to me, it looks rather commonsensically the case that unless they really had planned with bigger forces to come and, if you like, rescue or basically to consolidate to the power in the president's place, even if in this case perhaps the president was in residence, and I don't have that information, and perhaps they had killed him. I'm not quite sure whether the line they were taking was one that would necessarily have meant that they would be seeking to control Kinshasa and then the whole country. This may be if it was the case that they had attacked normally, usually television stations, national broadcasters, traditional national broadcasters, that's what, these kind of military guys would possibly do. You would say that from there, they take on the command and control and consolidate. Or perhaps if they had occupied a strategic military base within they come to or near the capital, which has got substantial influence again, where they'll take in terms of, they'll take on command and control and then consolidate in terms of military hardware and personnel. But merely going to presidential palace, taking charge and waving a flag and streamlining it on social media and sort of claiming some kind of, presenting almost a victory parade before anything has sort of really started. That sort of really surprised me. And so I am concerned, was this somebody with a mindset that sort of sought to underestimate the power of his own nation state called Congo? I do not know. This guy, having lived in the US not so long ago, we have many Africans who possibly think that because of the challenges facing their country, they get one or two mixed new experiences. They think possibly some of these activities are a walk in the park. Again, had it been the case that this guy had a background, again, I don't know, or possibly specialized training, maybe U.S. SEALs or something like that, Special Forces of America, places like that, I would say that, well, they were planning something far bigger than what we know. But genuinely, we still don't know. I still believe, I think it was rather amateurish. But of course, the bigger question is, as you said at the introduction, is it the case that Congo could easily have been ripe enough for this? I was trying to avoid this question. I'm still saying that, look, if you look at the manner in which the elections, which Tshisekedi won substantially, was contested, those normally tend to be avenues for discontent and coups. Over 20 people died. If you look at the fact that Tshisekedi at the moment is still struggling, that sort of a little surprised me. I know some of the players with basically getting consensus to have election of Speaker of Parliament in this case. Again, that is relatively surprising. So that tells you really how still polarized the politics in that country is. But Congo really, really needs to consolidate, the civil authority and civilian authority and political authority, and really to galvanize, if you like, consensus across the political divide to make sure that they're able to make sure they sustain and maintain this extremely sophisticated, extremely rich, but as I said, a country which still struggles with basically the ability of leadership really in Kinshasa to control its size, a reasonable proportion of the country, let alone a huge part of the country is possibly bigger than Uganda in Eastern DRC, which basically is out of control of the authorities. So these guys could have been, if you like, people who are basically bailing the cart for whoever. That is still a possibility. Yeah,
I mean, one place to start, Joseph, I suppose, would be if Tshisekedi actually names his government. He's appointed a prime minister. He was re-elected for a second term in December, but he's still not named his government.
That is exactly the point. And as I said, in this kind of situations, you don't want this kind of vacuums. So the implications there is that there are really, really certain things going on underlying which we do not know. But of course, it also tells you that maybe Tshisekedi has not sufficiently consolidated the power as it might have appeared, because he surprised many observers with the election outcome that took place in December. Many people didn't think that he would win this convincingly, and of course he did, of course, with claims and allegations of rigging. But if it is the case that he had this huge amount of majority, then there is no reason why it should take him this long time to form a government. One of the countries on this continent that needs strong leadership, in fact, possibly the country that needs the strongest leadership on particularly tropical Africa, is DR Congo. And that leadership must come from top, meaning the presidency, and the composition and form of government they form, in which case their cabinet. Beyond that, it is important this country is set in such a manner that they pick a little bit of a leaps from South Africa, where you guys continue to lead us, and sometimes some of us feel very jealous. Maybe we shall be applying for visas very soon, but that is not a message for other extremists. We put it aside. But why? Meaning that the Congo needs an executive which is strong, organized, legitimate, and credible. Congo needs a legislature which is strong, organized, coordinated, and legitimate and sufficiently mandated. And that's why it's extremely important that the position that Vital, in this case, Vital Kamerhe, was pushing for, should not really be one which is given, which is got by any average person, but it should really be a solid person to help move and lead that country in that middle arm of government. And finally,
and
a
Joseph,
judiciary that works, and a judiciary that works for 1 minute. That is why I'm saying you guys in South Africa, somebody can go to court, and whoever it is, very likely the findings will always be one in which you say that, well, the land guys at the top will have given their independent thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I haven't even touched on the issue of M23.
No, and by the way, I without prejudice, immediately thought about them. And once, and that's a difficult area to go, once I got through the listings of the initial key players, I sort of dismissed them. The profile of this Christian Malanga guy is possibly unlikely to be one in which you might say that they will possibly cross paths with the likes of M23, because M23's interests are very specific. But that said, the interests that Christian Malanga seems to present, including the background of going to the States and doing business in court, and beyond that, having players who are possibly associated with, trade in drugs. I'm not necessarily saying illicit trade, because I don't have that information. Tells you that these are guys who will not be very far from dealers beyond the surface, and which dealers beyond the surface will normally be men and women, particularly predominant men, who are interested in gold and many of those things associated with areas of conflict, areas of battle, areas which M23 find themselves at the center. Who knows? They could easily be a front. But as I said, whatever the case, M23 would possibly be smiling at this material time. I do not really think that the timing was necessarily good for Kinshasa. They must be quite surprised. But that said, I think in the recent times, the reaction that the rest of the continent had for M23 means that, no, I think the situation for them is not the situation that it was maybe a couple of years ago. I think it should be harder, except, of course, reports continue to come out of them gaining grounds. But for the moment, I'm not sure those grounds gained mean and necessarily easily translated to gaining reasonable support for anybody related with them to take Kinshasa. And in any case, in the event that anybody associated with M23 gets themselves involved or is associated with a coup like this, I think it will embolden the authorities in Kinshasa. I think it will mobilize a critical section of the Congolese people against them. And so it means it will be extremely unlikely that they would, in this case, get the object, if that object is reaching Kinshasa. But of course, we know the other deputy object is controlling a sizable part of Eastern Congo for either themselves, either for keeps or for kills, or perhaps even for these unfortunate separatist tendencies that you and I would rather we discuss another day.
Joseph Ochieno, let me thank you for your time this afternoon. Great pleasure talking to you. Joseph is an African affairs writer and commentator joining us from Uganda this afternoon.